Weird behaviors of people abused by narcissists. Have you ever felt like a stranger in your own mind and body after emotional trauma? Questioning why you've become so paranoid, jittery, isolated, and quick to apologize. Know that you're not losing your sanity. The peculiar behaviors you've adopted are likely coping mechanisms subconsciously created to survive narcissistic abuse. By understanding these common reactions, we can begin to unravel their origins, rewrite old patterns, and regain our sense of self. Let's bring these unsettling changes into the light, where true healing can begin. Hypervigilance, a restless search for hidden threats. Many survivors describe living in a state of constant hypervigilance, scanning their environment for any potential signs of deceit or malintent. Like a deer habitually sniffing the air, they feel a perpetual unease, especially around people, scanning for deceit, questioning even kind gestures as manipulative pretense after experiencing profound betrayal, suspicious of motives, unable to take words or actions at face value, always searching for ulterior motives, trouble relaxing, difficulty settling into the present moment without anticipating threats. This relentless alertness likely developed to avoid being blindsided again by hidden agendas and false personas. After their reality was deeply distorted by deception, survivors instinctively become watchful, bracing for manipulation around every corner. They scrutinize facial expressions and subtle intonations most would overlook, primed to detect deceit. But while hypervigilance is an adaptive behavior, it also prevents survivors from feeling safe or trusting themselves and others. Healing requires decompressing this constant state of anxious alertness when no real threats exist. Excessive apologizing, the compulsion to say sorry. You may find yourself apologizing incessantly and unnecessarily after narcissistic abuse, even becoming a scapegoat who reflexively takes the blame. This excessive sorriness often stems from feelings of self-blame, instilled through insidious conditioning by the narcissist. Reflexive apologies, habitually saying sorry even when you've done nothing wrong. Self-blaming, readily accepting fault and shouldering responsibility for issues beyond your control. Conflict avoidance, apologizing preemptively to prevent possible confrontations. Low self-worth, feeling undeserving, guilty, or afraid of taking up space. The narcissist grooms their targets to accept blame through constant gaslighting, projection, criticisms, and undermining confidence. By distorting reality, the narcissist convinces you that you are the problem, that your inherent flaws and failures cause every issue. Over time, this instills an almost compulsive need to apologize, a defense mechanism to avoid conflict, judgment, or abandonment. Healing requires releasing this conditioned self-blame and rebuilding your sense of self-worth. We all make mistakes, but you are not the scapegoat for a narcissist's projections. Accepting responsibility only for actions within your control allows genuine remorse to flow through freely without drowning in needless guilt. Criticism sensitivity, triggered by negative feedback. You may notice an intense sensitivity or aversion to any kind of criticism after narcissistic abuse, even if it's objectively fair or well-intended. Hearing negative feedback triggers deep distress, flooding your system with emotional flashbacks, disproportionate reactions, hurt, shock, or anger far exceeding the criticism severity. Conditioned response, inner critic or abuser's voice activated by negative feedback. Feedback avoidance, sidestepping critique whenever possible to avoid emotional triggers. Fragile self-esteem, difficulty handling anything perceived as rejection or blame. This hypersensitivity likely developed as a survival mechanism to shield against the narcissist's cruel belittling and character assassinations, thinly veiled as constructive advice. Their projections trained your nervous system to enter fight or flight upon hearing fault in yourself. Healing this sensitivity requires disentangling healthy feedback from the narcissist's weaponized critiques, slowly processing flashbacks to build emotional resilience, while also cultivating self-validation to combat conditioned self-blame, allows you to receive critique without feeling gutted or under attack. People-pleasing tendencies, the fear of disapproval. You may find an extreme aversion to disappointing others, or eliciting even minor disapproval after surviving a narcissist's crazy-making manipulation and grinding negativity. This often shows up as highly accommodating people-pleasing tendencies. Conflict avoidance, staying silent about needs to avoid arguments, judgment, or turmoil. Chameleon persona, altering behavior or preferences to become what others want. Poor boundaries, allowing mistreatment, disrespect, exploitation, or overstepping. Self-neglect, disregarding personal needs, emotions, values, or limitations. This exhaustion, desperation to please, emerges as your wounded inner child frantically attempts to prevent repetition of the narcissistic abuse, abandonment, or punishment you suffered whenever you exercised independence or expressed genuine needs. By muting your true self and becoming whoever others want in the moment, you hope to avoid their ire, gain superficial validation, and protect your shattered psyche from further abuse. But denying your authenticity for conditional approval only fragments your self-worth further. Healing means learning to validate yourself, set compassionate boundaries, and align with those who appreciate your real self. Self-worth instability, riding emotional highs and lows. You may vacillate between feeling confident, capable, and worthwhile to then swinging harshly into feeling incompetent, unlovable, and worthless. The narcissist's intermittent reinforcement, fluctuating between praise, admiration, and attention, and then abruptly withdrawing warmth and approval, conditioned this chronic self-worth instability. External validation seeking, relying heavily on others' opinions for your value. Imposter syndrome, feeling like a fraud, undeserving of accomplishments. Perfectionism, holding yourself to extremely high standards to prove worth. Comparison obsession, evaluating your value in relation to others' approval or status. The narcissist's manipulation tactics like idealization and devaluation train survivors to seek evidence of their worth externally, rather than cultivating inner self-acceptance and unconditional self-love. By keeping your value ever-changing and conditional based on the abuser's whims, you are prevented from forming an intact sense of self. Healing this instability requires untangling your inherent value and lovability from the narcissist's conditioning. Learning to self-validate and be present with yourself unconditionally cultivates emotional equanimity regardless of externals. Self-isolation tendencies, withdrawing from connections. Many survivors self-isolate, detaching from social circles, avoiding intimacy, and eschewing community after abuse. This may stem from several wounds. Social anxiety, fearing you'll be misunderstood, judged, or re-traumatized. Boundary protection, shielding yourself from further deception or mistreatment from unsafe people. Anhedonia, losing pleasure and motivation for activities you once enjoyed. Mistrust, wariness about letting people deeply know you after experiencing betrayal trauma. Social withdrawal is often subconsciously intended as self-protection after experiencing such profound boundary violations. False representations of love, manipulation, and betrayal. Isolating feels safer than risking further rejection or abuse. Yet avoiding meaningful human connections forgoes potentially healing relationships and further embeds the narcissist's conditioning. Finding the courage to slowly open your spirit to emotionally available people helps rewrite negative relationship patterns. Through experiencing healthy attachments, you can begin releasing social distrust and intolerable solitude. Start with low-stakes interactions to build confidence. Understanding allies do exist, and isolation only strengthened the narcissistic programming. Perfectionistic overachieving, the strive to be flawless. Do you punish yourself for even minor mistakes? Or push yourself relentlessly in pursuit of impossible standards of achievement and conduct? Perfectionism and overachieving tendencies often develop after narcissists habitually instill conditional self-worth based on meeting absurd expectations. Self-punishing, treating every fault or failure as proof of inadequacy. Black and white thinking, viewing performance and abilities in all or nothing categories. Emotional repression, rejecting emotions like jealousy, anger, or sadness as unacceptable flaws. Relentless drive, becoming highly motivated by desire to prove worth through results and accomplishments. The narcissist breeds perfectionism through unpredictable approval based on satisfying their excessive demands. You internalize the abuser's harsh judgment toward any perceived imperfections or failure to serve their needs. Healing requires practicing self-compassion, acknowledging shades of gray, and pursuing growth sustainably without self-judgment. Decision-making difficulties, crippling self-doubt. Survivors often become chronically indecisive and dependent on others' input after enduring a narcissist's pathological lies, confusing double messages, manipulations, and micromanagement. With no foundation of truth, the narcissist conditioned you to distrust your own judgment. Analysis paralysis, agonizing over choices for fear of being wrong. Lack of confidence, doubting your instincts, skills, vision, and problem-solving capabilities. Passivity and procrastination, stalling and avoiding decisions until pressed or seeking someone to decide for you. Self-gaslighting, second-guessing everything you think and feel. By trapping you in a distorted funhouse hall of mirrors reality, the narcissist undermined your ability to trust yourself. Breaking free requires disconnecting perceived faults or flaws from your value as a person. Be patient with yourself as you rebuild your inner guidance system. With time, self-trust can be restored after following your North Star, even if you stumble. Emotional regulation challenges. Losing control. Survivors often struggle with difficult emotions that seem to arise without warning and spill out rapidly like ocean waves without a shore. Emotional regulation challenges stem from the narcissist's conditioning. High emotional reactivity. Feeling frequently overwhelmed by anger, anxiety, shame, or sadness. Addictive tendencies. Self-medicating pain with unhealthy coping mechanisms. Rage issues. Heightened expressions of rage or indignation. Numbness. Feeling emotionally exhausted, burnt out, and void of sensation or joy. The narcissist suppresses natural emotional responses, causing them to eventually erupt volcanically through the accumulated pressure. By denying vulnerability and enforcing repression, the narcissist obstructed opportunities for healthy processing. Healing emotional regulation involves finding safe outlets for release through clinical support, creative expression, movement, or trusted friends. Embracing the full spectrum of human emotions reconnects you to living wholeheartedly without volatile numbing or flooding. As you can see, narcissistic abuse can plant the seeds for many quirky and troubling behaviors to take root as we adapt to cope with the poisoned environment cultivated by the narcissist. But in shining a light of awareness on these maladaptive patterns, we can identify the origins, right-size disproportionate reactions, establish appropriate boundaries, and progressively challenge conditioned voices. Rather than harshly judging these behaviors as weird, extending gentle compassion to ourselves allows space for healing, just as we would for a wounded child learning to navigate the world again after enduring a malicious storm. We need not let the narcissist's landmines, snares, and darkness define the rest of our journey. While their influence may linger for a time, we can cultivate new paths forward. Here is an introductory summary of the key points. Hypervigilance, a persistent alertness and questioning of others' motives after experiencing profound deception. Excessive apologizing, the tendency to reflexively say sorry due to conditioned feelings of guilt. Criticism sensitivity, feeling uniquely triggered by negative feedback that evokes past belittlement. People-pleasing, shape-shifting your needs to align with others to prevent disapproval. Self-worth instability, emotionally oscillating between confidence and self-loathing based on external validation. Isolation tendencies, withdrawing from connections and community to avoid vulnerability. Perfectionism, punishing yourself over mistakes stemming from the narcissist's impossible standards. Indecision, doubting your inner wisdom after enduring the narcissist's manipulations. Emotional regulation challenges, feeling frequently flooded with painful emotions you can't control. While these changes understandably developed as adaptations to abusive conditioning, they lose their usefulness once separated from the narcissist. By identifying these patterns within ourselves or loved ones, we can gradually heal and rewrite more empowering behavioral responses. If you recognize yourself or a loved one in these behaviors, know that healing is possible. The impacts of narcissistic abuse can be overcome with time, compassion, and the right support. You are not alone. There are thousands of gentle, wise souls who have walked this journey before you and understand in their heart the peculiar scars left by narcissists. By sharing this video, you allow others recovering from abuse to feel less isolated and find hope. This channel aims to create an understanding, non-judgmental community focused on healing together. We believe bringing narcissistic abuse out of the shadows allows survivors to rewrite their stories. Don't allow the narcissist's voice to condemn you. You did the best you could to preserve yourself in an unimaginably difficult situation. Now is the time for self-forgiveness and a new beginning. Join us to gain support, insights, and comfort from those further along the recovery path, who can guide you through the most confusing stages. By sharing stories and strategies, we can let go of past pain and clear space for the vibrant, authentic lives we deserve. Together we will blossom again, wiser, kinder, and stronger than before the darkness descended. We are far more than our trauma when united as one.